All right, and we're back with another exciting episode of the Graphic Sales Stories podcast.
Woohoo!
I'm Tom Stearns, and that's Peter Cleary. Let's start this one like we always do. Let's look at the story we're going to talk about, which is "You Told Me to," and this is, I think, a lot of fun in Eli's.
He's
Anyways,
he's 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 hiding a lot of stuff. So we can go through the regular story, but then, yeah, let's look into the absolute. He's getting crazy with the Easter eggs, and I think he likes the word puns. So we'll get into some of that. Uh, but yeah,
absolutely. So we'll leave you as the audience to read the thing in its entirety. But there are like multiple stories going on
yeah.
in this one. We'll break the story down itself. But in terms of the art, Peter, what's your favorite part of this one?
Well, first, I think for our international viewers here, this is the Boston Bruins. This is the TD Garden in Boston, Massachusetts for ice hockey, for the Boston Bruins ice hockey, a great franchise. We'll see how they do this year. But everything he does looks exactly like the place it is. So, right. So, I mean, that is the TD Garden. That's what it looks like. And then the distance, that's the Zakim Bridge. So it's just the detail. One of the things, if you look on the slide, the second page, he loves different perspective, right? So you've got the view from me down below, like the famous shot in Citizen Kane, start below, and then he's next he's above shot. So he does a lot of different perspectives, which is great, and I do appreciate him not giving me a big paunch there on my shirt, no hanging over my belt. So that's nice.
That's
But yeah, the
accurate.
facial expressions again. I think we've talked about before. Just crazy, crazy good with those facial expressions.
Yeah, I mean, look at that. That's just fantastic. That's fantastic. Some of my favorite things, being a Mad magazine fanatic, are that Eli created a story in the margins, a whole marginal story that carries through the whole story. I think that's awesome. I'm not going to
Yeah,
take you through every frame, but yeah, take a look at that. This guy getting smacked in the face. This is this guy right here. Oops, sorry, keeps.
I mean, there's just everything going on with that guy. He's just there's a tooth coming out. His eyeball looks like it's coming out. I don't know who that is on the Bruins, but he's not doing well. It's preseason game. He got knocked out.
Yeah, yeah, fantastic. And some of these signs in the background, I think, are credit to Eli for these signs. Love that. Really good stuff. Also,
Wait a minute. Do people get that? The net. We want net results. Get it? Because of sales in hockey.
I hope they get it. I hope our audience gets this. Like,
You get it?
you better
The
get it.
subtlety.
We
By the way, I don't know how clear the people's camera is, but that says puck you, puck.
yeah, there's some Boston humor for you that's appropriate.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, we want net results. I think is fantastic. There's also a story within a story here of so as you we're in virtual here, but normally we're in our penthouse suite in Boston in a building at 548 Rimmon Street, and this is where here's Peter when he found the location, and then walking
Well,
in.
go back, go back, because I do like the uh, office space for lease and for a good time call.
Yeah, it's fantastic. There's a couple other things. There's another Monty Python reference which we had in other comics. We'll let you find those on your own. And yeah, and there's walking into the empty office up there. We had yet to furnish it at that point, but now it's just a beautiful space. We'll show it in the podcast at some point. Corn. Sorry, I'm the corny. Yeah, corny. Sorry. Anyways, all right. Let's get into the story, Peter. Let me put this away here. So this is a story from your past, obviously. So what sparked this story?
Well, it's a true story. It's been edited to fit the screen, um, but we had a sales rep. I'm not going to give his real name, but we'll continue to call him Mike. Fascinating creature just not a good, believed himself to be a great salesperson, but really was not. He was very much a, let's give you the cheapest number. We can definitely save you 40% out of the gate and blah, just horrible. And I was really trying to transform the office to solution selling. Like it's, we really shouldn't be talking about product sets. We really shouldn't talk about pricing. We talk about what the customer solution is. So I remember meeting with this customer, and back in the day, basically people put, an RFP out, and it was always for frame relay, a frame relay network. And we had a meeting. So the Mike had quoted, quote, was planning to go to the meeting and took me. He's like, we're going to, present this to him. And I basically, when we go in there, I'm like, let's not give them presentations. We have to ask questions. He's like, well, there was an RFP. I'm like, that's great. We should still ask questions. So we got in there. The people were really nice, and we had a really great conversation. It lasted, we had an hour set aside, and it lasted like an hour and a half of going through what their pain points were. So Jim basically was like, okay, here's the quote. And I just kind of grabbed it, pulled it aside. I'm like, well, no, we're not going to quote this. Now that we know what your problems are, we're going to go back and come up with another solution. So we came back, and I basically, designed it for Mike. And I said, here, just quote this and get this to the engineer and quote this and send that to him. So he did. And then, the decision was made like a couple weeks later. And he called up and he came into my office. He's like, hey, they're not going to go with us. They're sticking with their provider. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Why are they doing that? And he's like, because they quoted them what they wanted. We quoted them something different they wanted. I'm like, okay, did you explain to him? Did you go through exactly what the business case was and what the problem solution was?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I quoted it because you told me to. And I'm like, well, I know I told you from the design based off of their feedback. Did you go through why we did this? I go, Mike, we walked through exactly the pain points this solves and why we're quoting this. And he's like, listen, all I know is you told me to do this. You're never supporting me. You're not helping me. And he just kind of goes off on me, and he storms out and leaves the office. And I'm like, oh my God, the guy's a nightmare. But I had a really good relation with the customer, so I called him up and said, hey, I just got the phone with Mike, and he said, you're sticking with, I think it was Sprint. I'm like, I think you're sticking with Sprint. And he goes, yeah, something we're familiar with. I'm like, yeah, okay. I'm just interested to know what we missed. Like, I'm pretty sure we solved your problem, but I'm like, what did Sprint do that's really different this time than we had to solve the problems you had? He goes, well, they're not really doing anything. I'm like, oh, what about this, this, this? And he's like, how are you solving that again? And I walked him through, and he goes, oh, I don't think we really understood that or remembered that. I'm like, okay, well, do we need to go through it again? And he's like, yeah, let me pull in this guy. And we sat there, we talked, and they were like, okay, that actually does make a lot more sense. And then they'd be like, look, send over the paperwork, we'll sign it. I'm like, great. So I faxed the paperwork. The next morning, Mike comes in. I'm like, hey, here's the paperwork. The customer signed. They're going with us. And he did. He's like, oh, that's awesome. I just crushed my number again. I just crushed my number. I'm like, you did diddly squat on this. And I'm like, I wish I could just rip this away from you and just not give you any of the commission. But he was gone sometime later. But yeah, that's basically the story. It was a true story about what happened. And I think I like the story itself because it's about finding the pain point for the customer. It has nothing to do with pricing. It had really, the decision they made had zero to do with pricing. It had to do with solving their problem, communicating with them, make sure they understood what the problem, that we knew what their problem was, and we had a solution for it. And that's, the selling should be just that easy. It's not, I understand it, but hey, we've solved your problem. Does this make sense to you? Great, let's move forward.
Yeah, when I heard the story, I saw like a couple of lessons in it. One was like actually like listening to the customer and having enough like insights to be like, okay, they think they need this, but they really need this. And then when it comes to presenting the solution is sort of presenting that logic, right? And I think a
Yeah,
lot of reps are like always in presentation mode. Like he was going to go into that RFP to just present versus discovery. And then, hey, this is what actually it sounds like you need. And here's a better solution to that problem. Like I know that sounds oversimplified, but it really breaks down into
yeah,
those three simple components to make a sale.
yeah. And it's it when you have like, so this is, I mean, the customer didn't realize, I mean, that's their job. They quoted what they think they wanted, um, which is great, especially back in the day, which there wasn't a tremendous amount of choices. But like, hey, I might as well just stick to what I got. And it's your job as a sales to say, well, there's something different out there. We can do things different for you,
Yeah.
and let me ask the questions. Um, so it was really beginning of the stage when MPLS was coming out, internet and voice over IP. So there's a lot more things you can do for a customer. So we needed to. So we're in the midst of transitioning to a transitioning office to that solution selling. Like you can't just go and
Solutions.
quote. Let's ask the questions, and had a couple rules. Um, and Mike just did never ever follow the rules. And Mike, I think some point we'll have a story where so Mike is the same guy who's like, what's your best case, worst case, most likely? So Mike's the guy who came up with yeah, most likely is my worst case is 5,000. My most likely is zero. I'm like, you're an idiot. But there is another
Well,
time like, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say is so coming at it like as a leader though, like did you try to coach him? Could he learn? It sounds like he couldn't learn, but did you
He was
actually try
uncoachable.
to coach him?
Yeah,
Okay.
he was uncoachable. Unfortunately, like I would sit down with him and kind of walk him through it, and he would just in the middle of just telling me, he's like, you know what we should do, and like I'd be walking through how we're going to attack the marketplace, and his walk through some of the stuff he had, and he always just cut to something else like, we should get SDRs, we should get people to set me up on, I can close a ton of business, but I'm wasting my time making phone calls. I'm
You
like,
mean I can transact
yeah,
if I get an
uh,
order placed on my desk?
yes, if somebody faxes me the order, I can take that. I'm really good at that. I should get paid for that. But yeah, he was, and that's quite. I think we talked about this before. The coachability of somebody when you hire
Yeah.
them is huge. So he was an inherited person. And not that I haven't hired people that haven't been great, but I definitely did not hire that person.
Yeah, and there is a like a point, recognize. So having coached a lot of reps, there's your A, B, and C players, and there's A players maybe leave them alone. B players trying to coach them into A players, C players see if they can get the B players, but there's also that reality of like, do they want to get better? If they don't want to get better at all, there's no amount of coaching in the world that's going to help that person because ultimately it's them that it's a rep
Yeah,
that
you got to be
changes the
willing
behavior.
to.
Yeah.
He always had the attitude. He was a relatively young guy that he was fantastic at sales. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah, it's good to be humble in sales because I mean, even at our age, I mean, like, I still listen to my own calls. I still like look for coaching because you can always be better, right? No,
yeah, yeah.
nobody really knows how to do it perfectly.
Exactly. At the same time as this guy, I had another guy that was new to sales, came in after about 6 months, put him on PIP, but he was always willing to listen, always willing to learn. Just wasn't working out. And then some whatever reason, the PIP really kicked him in gear, and he ended up being one of the top number one sales reps in the
Mhm.
country and really crushing it. Because he was coachable. He
Yeah.
listened, he adjusted, and the plan. There's a couple different ways to do plans. We don't want to get into this too much, but plans are there to set guidelines and guidance and like, okay, maybe we should do things. Let's be really, really prescriptive and follow this letter of the law. So either people can look at it and say, this person's trying to manage me out, I'm going to leave, or if I follow this, can I be successful? And Alan really took it and said, okay, let me be really prescriptive. And we sat down from 5 to 6 o'clock almost every single night while he was on plan to walk through everything he did during the day. I remember one of the lessons I think this guy Mike, I almost called by his real name, never learned. Uh, but this I'm going to call him Alan. Alan learned was when you quote you be exactly as specific as possible to a customer. So remember, Alan had quoted a customer like, I'm going to make up a number, $15,190. That was the cost. And he quoted him, and he kept on quoting him $15,000. So then he sent the
Mm,
contract over, and it's like $15,190. And the guy kind of like, this is not what we agreed to. And he's like, it's close enough. And he's like, that's $190. The guy's like, yeah, I got a budget here. This is not what we budgeted for. This is the whole thing. And I told him like, I've been, you have to be very specific. I go, because if you look sloppy And some of these things, then they have that in mind that you're sloppy. And he took that to heart and changed. Mike would never change.
No. Yeah, you got to be able to change. And the details matter, I think, right? Not only is it a good idea to give a specific number, but it's also more believable. When I know it, at least whenever I see like a round number, I'm like, well, that's negotiable, right? 15,000, that can come down.
Yeah,
But he's quoting above like what he actually told the guy. It's like, wow, that's not cool. You got to
yeah,
come under if you're using a
yeah,
round number.
yeah, yeah.
So I had another question for you. um, if you had to sum up the mistake that Mike made here in one sentence, how would you do
Accepting the job as we begin with.
it?
he
I
should
expect
should never
nothing
have.
less from you for an answer
Yeah,
to
he
a
should never have
question.
big. Yeah, he should never have become a salesperson. Um, in one sentence, whatever. I mean, there's so many things he did wrong here. So, but really, to your point, in all aspects, with me or the customer, just didn't listen.
Didn't listen. That's really good. Yeah, you have to listen. I'm kind of a process guy, right? I work with a lot of teams, so I'm always thinking about how do we build repeatable systems. So and keep them as simple as possible. So when I think about a discovery or even a whole sales process, so when I think about that repeatable process, right, I think like, one, you got to ask the questions and listen. Two, you have to repeat back to the customer, like, hey, it sounds like you're doing this, like repackage it a little bit, and you can see if you feel like you're on the same page. And then three, does your solution actually solve those problems? It's really that simple. I think let me ask you a different question, which I'll answer. I'd like to answer after is like, what's the
Which I'll
worst?
answer for you.
Well, I want to get your take on it. When you think about a first discovery call with a client, 30-minute hour discovery call, what are the biggest mistakes that transactional reps, if you will, a guy like Mike,
Talk,
that make?
talking, talking. This again, it's the opposite of listening. They're selling, they're talking, and they're selling, and it's just that's just such a no. I'm like, we're here to hear them, to talk to them. And you brought up something, and I was thinking about this. Um, in front of a customer and kind of recapping and restating what they're saying. One of the tricks I loved is sometimes I didn't feel like I wanted to guide them a little bit more into the direction of giving more information because some people can be very guarded or whatever. So you kind of do recap,
Mm-hmm.
and oftentimes I would recap in an area that I wanted more information incorrectly to kind of force them because customers like correcting you. They like telling. So recapping a little bit in a way to force the conversation a little bit more. That recap can be very useful, not just of confirming what you want, but to getting more information out of a customer.
Yeah. I find with that tactic when you're recapping, if you're like, hey, so it sounds like, X, Y, and Z is a problem. If you say that and then shut up, you almost invariably get a either yes, but, and then they give you a whole bunch of information, or no, not exactly. What we're really trying to do, or what the real
Yeah,
problem is this. So it's that little like recap, repackage, and then just hand it over to them to either
yeah,
affirm it. They never do. Or they always do plus. Love
yeah.
that.
And you got to get the minutia. Like they love giving you a high level, and your goal is to give me the details because that's where I'm going to make a difference. Is those the minutia.
Yeah. I have a story on like a successful sort of situation I had where CEO introduces me to another CEO. And I get on the Zoom call with this guy, and he said, "Hey, Jason told me, what you did with their SDR team and their demand gen function. I think we have the same problem. What will it cost? What will it cost to hire you to do the same thing?" And I said, "Sure, I can share that with you. However, would you mind if I asked you a couple of questions first?" I said, "Sure, go ahead." 40 minutes later, we had identified him like, okay, Will, you actually you don't have the same problems that team had. What I think your problems are X, Y, and Z. and how we could potentially fix that is this. And he was like, great, sign me up. Um, and it was
Yeah.
wildly different. And it was that simple. You know, I think what happens with a lot of more transactional reps is they hop onto a discovery call and say, hey, what do you cost, or what do you do, or tell me about your company. And they present and they pitch, and they've got no context. It could be all irrelevant information to the actual problem they have. And now you've burned your whole 30 minutes with them and you don't know anything. All right.
Right.
So ask questions and listen.
Ask questions and listen.
Okay. So let's go into part three, where I've got a series of questions. I think that'll maybe give us,
Okay.
some nice takeaways. Okay. Here's the first one. Why is a transactional mindset a big problem with sales reps?
Is it? Well, it depends on the job, right? And what's their job?
Well,
I'm not sure the question. I'm not sure I like the question.
fair enough.
I
Fair enough.
think, I, th- I guess, what do you, I don't like the question.
So
Rephrase it.
let's define what a transactional mindset is. I think it's
Yeah.
what we've defined, is where it's I'm just going to pitch. It's the opposite of consultative selling or solution selling. Is where you like Mike, who wanted a BDR team, and his expectation of that BDR team was probably going to be that they do everything, and it comes to him almost as like an order, to take an order.
Yeah. I'm walking in and I'm giving a quote and I'm signing
Yeah.
the deal. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's appropriate to maybe SMB or small level kind of selling, but I
Yeah.
think not the kind of sales that, most
Yeah. Yeah. The
SaaS
larger. Yeah.
enterprise, you need to sell solutions. So that mindset's just not appropriate.
Well, I don't
It's
think it. So I think what I'm having I have a little bit difficulty is because that the world has completely changed. So I don't. I would rephrase it because I'm not sure salespeople are transactional as much anymore as more of um, they're really not understanding how to solution sell. They might think they are by asking questions. I think people, and this is maybe just the people I'm seeing, they believe that they're asking and they're doing the correct things and becoming and listening and asking questions, but they don't really understand the solutioning. So
mm,
I
mm,
feel, and maybe it's just the type of business, the salesperson has to be more of an engineer in today's world. Like, because you have to ask real, like, it's not just asking a set amount of questions. So I'll see and hear customers reps going and asking a lot of questions, but I don't think they understand what that means and how to drive a conversation rather than asking questions. And so that's why I don't think it's as such transactional. I think it's more of the sales today are a lot more sophisticated, and you have to have a real true understanding of how your product sits, what your product sits with the target account profile, what do you guys say, what the ICP is, what their customers are, what they're focused on, what we're solving for them. Do the research about, hey, this industry buys this way, and this is their big pain points, and what does that mean, and how can we solve it? And everything's not the same, so you can't fall into, because as a hospital, I'm going to ask these 5 questions, assuming these are the problems they have. It's not, doesn't work that way. So I think that's why I kind of struggle with your question a little bit, because I would spin it to saying the salesperson has to really understand how they can solve a person's solutions, well, what the customer's pain points are, and ask the appropriate follow-up questions rather than just asking a question that they've have written down and saying this should be the next question.
yeah. Great point. And I always know I'm sort of dealing with someone that is like needs a lot more of the, if you will, business acumen, product knowledge. That sort of, when I hear a rep say, um, uh, I don't want to ask them all those questions because they feel like they're being interrogated. And that's sort of like an indication of like, oh, okay, these questions are not a laundry list to just ask and
Right.
write down the answers. They're just a an access point to listening, right? And then following where it goes, because like a good question should open up the buyer. They start to share some, and now your job is to, if you know enough about your solution, their ICP, their problems, that you can follow that thread and then identify, like, oh, your situation, this is the challenge you have. Our solution actually won't solve that. You should go somewhere else. Or
Yeah. Yeah.
it will, and here's how. That's the purpose of the questions. It's not an interrogation.
Yeah.
It's a way to start the conversation.
And quite frankly, as you kind of go through that, one of the things I used to tell, I'm like, you really should be excited about it. Like, because if you're doing this job, like guys open up to you, like it should be exciting. I'm like, oh, tell me more about that. I'm like, that's fascinating. And you take just because you're interested in what they're doing. That one thing I loved about sales is I kind of get bored with the same thing. But if you're meeting with all kinds of different customers and solutioning for them, it's always different. What they're doing and what their solutions. And sitting down and talking to them, there's so many customers we sat down and just fascinated about what their business was. What we up in Waltham, Mass, one of the first genetic companies. I'm like, I sat there for hours listening to the guy tell me how they're doing the DNA and who their customers were and how they were impacted by the Obama administration and all. It's just, I'm like, this is fascinating. What it has to do with building a network, nothing. But I'm just fascinated. Like it's just But yeah, you have to be interested in it, and that drives the conversations, right? If you're really interested in it, in solving the problems and understanding what your solutions are. If you're just going through the motions because you like to make a lot of money in sales, I'm like, you might not be as successful.
Yeah. Yeah. You want to live in that moment and be curious and enjoy, like, the act of learning something each time. Yeah, it really does help that skill. How do managers balance giving direction versus teaching
Yeah, it's there's a time and place for both, right? So there's a certain time, like, okay, I'm gonna be prescriptive here and say this is the way you need to go move forward. Um, it's always tough because people learn from mistakes, but you want those mistakes to be within, without losing the opportunity, losing the deal.
Yeah.
Um, while I, as a as a manager, have potentially could afford to lose a deal here or there, the salesperson really can't. There's those deals are hard to come by and hard to find, so you don't want to impact them too much. So there's a fine line of like, hey, do it this way. When they find the success, tell them why they found success. So you want to try to allow them to be, to do things on their own, but without damaging the opportunity to close the deal. So I think you just, as a manager, you kind of have to play it by ear. Like, what in this situation is going to teach the most, get this guy to grow, but without impacting that in a negative way. Because no matter what you do, if you try to even if let them fail and they didn't get the deal, and they're going to be pissed at you.
Yeah.
Like, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
in the case of this story, right? Like you basically took over the sale, right? Uh, Not the ideal thing, right? You want to teach someone how to close that sale themselves, but clearly Mike was not having it and just got mad and stormed out of the room. You still made his commission for him. So, an example of, yeah, that was you. You knew that I assume that you knew he just couldn't do it. Well, he told you he couldn't do it. He walked away from it and said it was your fault. And then you went and closed the sale and he got the benefit of it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
uh,
By the way, there's so many. I loved taking the back seat to so many deals and watching somebody just grow and expand, and it is nice. But yeah, with Mike, I knew what I had to do.
Sometimes you do. Um, okay, here's one. So, what's a practical change a sales leader could make tomorrow to prevent this kind of mistake? How could you get ahead of this? Say Mike is not the guy that can't be coached, but maybe has some of this in them. How do you get ahead of it, Peter?
You fired them.
No, I'm saying say they're capable of improvement.
Oh, they're capable of improvement.
how
Um,
how do you get ahead of this? Do you role play? Do you run workshops,
well,
or do you
so
just
so
coach?
I would say this individual was, because it's so incapable of listening and got angry so quickly. With a normal human being, the expectation, when I asked, and I actually gave more than just two times when I was trying to coach him like, do you understand what the solution is? Do you get what the solution is? And if we could have had that conversation, I believe they would have been able to, okay, let me get back to the customer. Like, and I would have given guidance. I'm like, take everything we just talked about, go back to the customer, talk about that. If you need me on the phone, I'll be on there, but this is what you should be doing. This guy was so adamant that he just wouldn't listen and goes angry and just was done, that I couldn't get him to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm trying to coach him. I'm like, okay, why did we do this? Okay, what was the solution? What was their problem? And to the point where he shut down, is like, you told me to, it's your fault. I lost the deal. Click, hang, walked out of the office. I'm like, this is, that's uncomfortable. But
Yeah.
so how to deal with this in the future? Again, I'm going to go back to, yeah, Mike should have been fired a lot, much earlier. And lesson learned.
Do you think, knowing your personality as long as I have, do you have any reps that you think you could have done a better job? Do you have, let me rephrase that without like dropping things. Do you have any reps in your past where you think you could have done a better job coaching them? And if so, what would you have done differently?
Well, I mean, it'd be arrogant of me to say no. I coach them well. You can always coach somebody better, but is there anything that stands out like, oh, if I had spent more time? Um, Early on in my career, there was a guy that would, I mean, really busted his hump, but just couldn't close anything. And eventually, you know, after probably about a year of really not selling anything, we gave him a lot of runway because he worked really, really hard. I just couldn't close any door. I'm like, I probably could have done something and better with him, but that was at a time when I had like 14 reps, and like there's only so much you can do. But I'll give myself an excuse there. But no, I could have done more there. But I think later on, I think as people I've worked with get this, there's probably a lot of things they can point out I could have done. So there's always something. But I think as a most part, I really think I put people in a position of success as best as I could. But there's probably one person I look back to that um, I think left the industry of sales, and I'm like, it wasn't he was bad. He just for whatever reason I didn't get down to why he wasn't closing any business. Couldn't really get the proper appointment and couldn't close the business, but he tried. So I don't know. I think that's, yeah. There's one guy.
One guy I had on the team, and when I look back on it, um, it we had him testing a new solution to a new ICP. Like, it really wasn't his fault at all. He made all the effort, and it was like a product market fit issue. And he worked his butt off. And we weren't going to let him go because we were going to find another place for him. We thought maybe better in account management. But it turns out that, yeah, it was sort of the company. And I was junior. I didn't recognize that, hey, this test solution to this target, it wasn't ready. Because this guy went off to another job after that, crushed it, led a team, moved to the UK, built a whole team. Like, he's gone on to an amazing career in sales. And we're still friends today. That's Dave Henry. And at the time, yeah, it wasn't his fault, but at the time we didn't know why. We thought, there was an issue, but there wasn't. It was product market fit mostly.
How do you have? I mean, we just talked about it a little bit there, but do you have anything that was this egregious where you're like, the sales rep is so difficult to work with? You're like, yeah, it's not a fit, and you're a headache.
Yeah. So it's funny to say this, but one of my bigger regrets was not firing someone sooner. Um, I was new to managing a sales team, and this guy was hungover most days. Even told me he was hungover.
So
Turns out
flash
he
forwards to
was.
the other cartoon of the drunken interview. Yeah.
So yeah, I have a couple of stories I think that he'll end up in at some point. But what happened is eventually I think he left on his own.
Mhm.
I think he had been sleeping in the bathroom. Told me he was hungover many days,
Where do you sleep
and
in the
it,
bathroom? That can't be comfortable.
yeah, I know. I learned that later. So here's the thing that, like, most everybody in the office knows it way ahead of management. And when he finally left, they were all like, "What were you waiting for?" You know, like, why didn't you? They were just shocked that I didn't fire him. And we also went and listened to his voicemails after, or somebody on the team did, and said, "Come over here and listen to this." And it was one angry customer after another, and it was all the basics, Peter. It was like, just didn't reply. Didn't. You were supposed to send me an email. I never got the quote. Like, it was all the easy stuff
Yeah.
that he wasn't doing. Uh, and Despite every effort to coach and help and drive, and ran special incentives to try and motivate him like a team. We
Yeah.
looked at it. We looked at his profile because we had like profiled the candidates before we hired them, and what someone in like he's motivated by team. So I created a team incentive that if everyone hits quota this month, I take everybody out to dinner at the restaurant of your choice. And he hit the number for the first time ever at 10 o'clock on the last day of the month, a Friday night, because everybody was driving him. And then
Yeah.
that was the last month he hit it. When I didn't have that incentive again, it didn't hit
Yeah.
again. So yeah, long
I think it's the most people that I've ever let go. The people I've let go the most, if outside of riffs and the corporate requiring 20% or whatever, it lazy or uncoachable, right? All
yeah,
right, that guy just lazy. I'm like, what? I mean, I've had to let go people with families, and I really have not regretted it simply because I do feel bad for the families. I'm like, you have a family, and you're just not working. I'm like, try, and
yeah.
we'll give you a shot and we'll help you. But if you're not trying, like, what? How are you doing? I mean, it always blow my mind. I'm like, we're very clear about what needs to be done here.
Yeah.
How are you just
I
being lazy?
I had a client once where I advised them, I'm like, this guy's toxic. And I didn't have a lot of concrete facts. It's just after doing this for so long, trying to coach, going through like a couple of weeks of coaching, I was like, and none of his peers, like often when I'm doing intake and talking to peers, I can usually get people to open up. They were, they were pretty close lipped about it, but I still felt it. But it still took a while because HR's like, no, we got to put him on a PIP. So we did some things. Eventually, the CEO stepped in and said, just he's gone. Right. I came in like the next day, flew in and walked in. I'm like, where is so and so? And they're like, the CEO actually had us get rid of him. I'm like, oh, the PIP. Anyways, what we learned rapidly after that was like everybody was afraid of him. So the reps didn't tell me because he was like threatening, and he actually, like, I guess, would blow his nose and throw it over the cube onto his peers. We had a couple of in the future, like someone called in where like, hey, this guy, like, I'm gonna get a restraining order. Your sales rep keep calling him, like, oh, we let him go last week. Like, it was really toxic. Yeah, that was an unfortunate situation, and a little nerve wracking because it sounded like he was a lot worse than than we thought.
Well, it's good to hear. I mean, I don't want to upset my HR friends out there, but I often had to push HR like we're letting this person go. Well, you got to give them some more chance. I'm like, no, I've done the work. I've documented this. We're moving on and getting this done. And I'm
Yeah,
sorry, but we're gonna move on now. So I probably said this when coach used to coach my managers, anybody like firing, like HR is here to protect the company and they want to make sure you do the right thing, but do the right thing but don't let it hang on. I'm like, it's more toxic to the people around. I'm like, it's more toxic to them.
yeah.
I'm like, if you have a bad apple hanging around, then everybody else is like, I can't, why are you keeping this person? It brings the morale down of the whole office.
When you don't get rid of like someone that's toxic or difficult, morale actually goes down. Like, I think a lot of managers are afraid that, well, if I let go of someone, it's going to make everyone nervous. And if that person is in fact toxic or negative, then morale's actually going to go up. Because more than once, I've had people come up to me and like, what took you so long?
Yeah.
Right? Did you know this, that, and the? I'm like, why didn't you tell me that stuff? I didn't know. And so they all know. So do your homework, be fair, right? Avoid your unconscious bias and things, but you have to deal with it for the respect of your team as
Yeah.
well.
And don't be like Tom. Pay attention to your people. See what they're doing. Maybe check in every while. Hey,
Check
the guy's
check the
always
bathroom at
check
lunch.
the bathroom. See, just do the basics as a
maybe
manager.
maybe they're sleeping in the bathroom.
Uh, all right.
Yeah.
Anything else we want to talk about with this?
No, I think we got it all. Thanks for joining us today, and I hope you enjoyed the story. And let us know if you found any Easter eggs we didn't mention.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.